This episode is about Moses. You're watching Lore of the Ancients with Oscar, where we cover the history of our favorite biblical figures in a biblically accurate and concise way. Moses enters the biblical narrative as a man with a deeply fractured identity. Born a Hebrew slave, raised as an Egyptian royal, and eventually hiding as a Midianite nomad, he belongs to no one and has no home. His very first attempt at leadership is an unmitigated disaster. He kills an Egyptian who is beating a Hebrew worker, assuming his brethren will recognize him as their protector. Instead, he is immediately rejected by his own people, with one fellow Hebrew bluntly asking him, "Who made you a prince and judge over us?" Wanted for his crime by Pharaoh, Moses is forced to flee the Egyptian empire to avoid execution. He lands in the desert of Midian, where he spends decades working as an anonymous shepherd, entirely removed from any levers of power. 40 years in the wilderness have buried the prince under the shepherd. He is a man who has surrendered to his anonymity, convinced that his role in history ended the moment he fled the palace. Then, at 80 years old, while tending his father-in-law's flock near Mount Horeb, he encounters a bush engulfed in flames that refuses to burn up. A voice calls out from the fire, commanding him to return to Egypt and demand the release of the enslaved Israelites. Moses immediately starts building a defense to get out of the assignment. He asks, "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" He insists the Israelites will never believe him, and he points out a severe personal flaw, claiming he is heavy of mouth and tongue, lacking the elite eloquence required to negotiate with a head of state. God overrides every excuse. He appoints Moses' brother Aaron to act as his official spokesman. God also asks Moses what is in his hand, and by taking Moses' own ordinary shepherd's staff, God transformed it into a tangible tool of divine authority to back up his demands. This is the starting line for his mission. A terrified exile, slow of speech, and pursued by Pharaoh's justice, is being sent back to the heart of the most formidable empire on earth to dictate terms to a tyrant. The external conflict with Egypt is resolved with shocking speed. Through a devastating series of plagues and the dramatic crossing of the Sea of Reeds, the Egyptian army is swept away. Moses possesses undeniable miraculous authority over a newly freed nation, but that authority immediately collides with the brutal logistics of survival. A past assembly of clans, numbering in the thousands, is now marching into a barren desert. Within days, they face crippling shortages of water and food, and panic sets in. The psychological toll of managing this crisis falls squarely on Moses. The Israelites openly revolt against him, bitterly declaring they would rather die as well-fed slaves in Egypt than starve as free people in the wilderness. Moses tries to handle every single grievance himself, sitting from morning until evening as the sole judge for the entire assembly. His father-in-law Jethro observes this impossible workload and warns him that he is on the verge of complete physical and mental collapse. Jethro proposes a strict system of delegation. The population is divided into manageable blocks. Moses appoints capable, trustworthy men as commanders over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. This structure acts as a filter. Everyday disputes are handled at the lowest levels. Only the most severe cases reach Moses. Miracles might topple a throne in a single night, but the slow, grinding work of building a nation happens in the tents of these newly appointed commanders. That administrative structure is soon put into its ultimate test. Moses climbs Mount Sinai to receive the law, leaving the camp under the joint authority of Aaron and Hur. But while he is isolated on those rugged peaks for 40 days, the camp spirals into chaos. Under intense pressure from the mob, and with Hur conspicuously absent, Aaron capitulates, forging a golden calf for the people to worship. This rebellion prompts a fierce response. God tells Moses that the Israelites are corrupt and proposed a radical reset. He will wipe out the population and build a brand new nation starting solely with Moses. Moses is handed an opportunity for ultimate personal glory, a chance to be the sole founding father of a new people, free from the burden of this rebellious generation. He turns it down. He passionately intercedes, reminding God of his original promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and begs him to spare the camp. The man who once begged for someone else to take the job now stands as a shield for the very people who rejected him. He gambles his own place in history to keep the nation's promise alive. But that provocative patience does not last forever. Fast forward through nearly 40 years of wandering, and the relentless grind of leadership finally takes its toll. The Israelites arrive at Meribah, and once again, there is no water. The people swarm Moses and Aaron in a bitter, familiar revolt. God provides explicit instructions: gather the assembly and speak to a specific rock, and it will yield water. But Moses snaps, boiling with frustration. He berates the crowds as rebels, raises his staff, and violently strikes the rock twice. Water gushes out, but the personal consequence is immediate and devastating. Because Moses disobeyed the command and failed to uphold a standard of holiness in front of the congregation, he is handed a permanent sentence. He is barred from leading the Israelites into the promised land. It is a brutal illustration of accountability. The higher the authority you wield, the stricter the standard you are held to. After decades of bearing the weight of a nation, the relentless pressure caused even their greatest leader to crack. Upon receiving his sentence, Moses does not stage a protest, succumb to bitterness, or abandon his post. Instead, he immediately shifts his focus to the survival of his people and begins planning his own succession. He petitions God to appoint a new leader, so the assembly will not be left as sheep without a shepherd. At God's direction, Moses publicly lays his hand on Joshua, transferring his authority in front of the entire congregation to guarantee a stable transition of power. His final act is a solitary ascent up Mount Nebo. From this vantage point, overlooking the sprawling Jordan Valley, he is given one long look at the territory he spent his life marching towards. He dies there on the mountain alone. He receives no grand funeral in the land of milk and honey. Every ounce of his effort, his stress, and his suffering was spent entirely for the benefit of a future he would never participate in. Moses proves that the highest form of leadership is rarely about innate confidence or crossing the finish line yourself. It is the grueling, selfless work of bearing the burdens of flawed people and ensuring the next generation is prepared to inherit the promise. If you want to watch more videos like this, go ahead and click on the video of your screen right now. Every like and subscribe is appreciated, and feel free to share this with your Christian brethren who are interested in an efficient way of learning the story of different biblical figures. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.